Alors on va se faire un petit stream sur The Stanley Parabole édition Deluxe. J'ai jamais fait le jeu de base, donc on va voir. Moi ça fait 3 fois qu'il me demande de rentrer l'heure, 2 fois pour les tests. Donc il est 6h46. Voilà. Ah oui, c'est l'heure exacte, hein. Vous savez, je veux juste vous dire que cette heure soit exactement, je passe un excellent moment à régler ces paramètres. J'ai l'impression d'en apprendre plus sur vous et vos préférences. Lancez de nouveaux curseurs pour recueillir des données à votre sujet. Rien de compliqué, oui, je vais en fabriquer de nouveaux. Ça devrait être prêt à la prochaine fois que vous démarrez le jeu. D'accord. Donc je vais juste voir un truc. Les commandes. Et je pose ma manette. L'audio, je vais un tout petit peu le baisser à 75. Là, ça devrait être bon, même 72 avec. 72 et 72. Voilà. On est prêt pour le jeu. C'est bon. Commencez le jeu.
This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he
Il
was
travaillait pour une
employee number
entreprise
4.
installée dans un grand immeuble où il était
Employee
employé.
number
Le travail de
427's
l'employé
job was
427,
simple.
c'est simple.
He sat at his desk in
De
room
s'asseoir derrière son
427
ordinateur de
and he
bureau et
hit
appuyer sur les touches de son clavier.
Orders
Pas
came
trop
to him
dur.
through a monitor on his
L'inscription
desk.
lui parvenait à travers un
telling him
écran,
what
lui
buttons
indiquant
to
direct
push, how
quelle
long to
touche
push
à...
them,
Ah,
and in
ouais.
what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month
Jour après
of
jour, la même
every
chose.
year.
Ça doit être lassant comme boulot.
Others might have considered it soul-rending.
Ouais,
Stanley
exactement.
relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day, something very peculiar happened.
Et soudain,
Something that would
un
forever
jour qui
change
changeait Stanley
Stanley.
à tout jamais.
Something he would never quite forget.
Le Stanley Parabole. Ah, c'est Parabole, moi j'ai mis Parabole. Bon, en français, on peut dire que ça se dit, quoi. Réaliser que pas une seule instruction ne lui était parvenue à l'écran, personne n'était venu pouvoir lui donner les autres, l'inviter à une réunion, ni même le saluer. Tous, l'entreprise n'a jamais fait d'un tel silence. Assurément, quelque chose n'allait pas.
Frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and stepped out of his office.
Je fais ça pour la souris. Une seconde, monsieur, dame. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? Rien à faire. Peut-être baisser un peu la sensibilité de la souris. Ça me fait mettre à 70. Ah non, c'est le champ de vision, ça. Stabilité caméra 4. On va essayer comme ça, on va voir ce que ça donne. Voilà, c'est déjà mieux.
All of his co-workers were gone, What could it
Il est
mean?
disparu, mais
Stanley
pourquoi?
decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo. No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
Salle de réunion, ok. Mince. Ah, ok. Je pense que c'est par là. Hein.
When Stanley came to a set of two open
Par là, à la
doors,
hauteur
he
des deux
entered the
portes
door on his
là
left.
sont ouvrées dans celle de gauche. Est-ce qu'on va à gauche ou est-ce qu'on va à droite? On va à gauche, allez.
Yet there was not a single person here
Pourtant, là
either.
non plus, il n'y avait
Feeling a
personne.
wave of
Saisi
disbelief,
par une vague
Stanley decided to go
Stanley
up to his
décida de
boss's
monter
office, hoping he
jusqu'au
might find
bureau
an
de son
answer
chef
there.
dans l'espoir de trouver une réponse. Déjà, on va faire demi-tour, on va voir ce qu'il y avait à droite. Ah, je peux plus.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Une fois descendre.
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss. Admitting he had left his post during work hours, he might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. All of my co-workers blinking mysteriously out of existence in a single moment for no reason at all. None of it made any logical sense. And as Stanley pondered this, he began to make other strange observations. For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down? Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he went? And for that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Were they simply repeating? No, Stanley said to himself, this is all too strange. This can't be real. And at last, he came to the conclusion that had been on the tip of his tongue. He just hadn't found the words. I'm dreaming! He yelled. This is all a dream. Oh, what a relief Stanley felt to have finally found an answer, an explanation. His co-workers weren't actually gone. He wasn't going to lose his job. He wasn't crazy after all. And he thought to himself, I suppose I'll wake up soon. I'll have to go back to my boring real-life job pushing buttons. I may as well enjoy this while I'm still lucid. So, he imagined himself flying and began to gently float above the ground. Then he imagined himself soaring through space on a magical starfield, and it too appeared. It was so much fun, and Stanley marveled that he had still not woken up. How was he remaining so lucid? And then perhaps the strangest question of them all entered Stanley's head. One he was amazed he hadn't asked himself sooner. Why is there a voice in my head dictating everything that I'm doing and thinking? Now the voice was describing itself being considered by Stanley, who found it particularly strange. I'm dreaming about a voice describing me, thinking about how it's describing my thoughts, he thought. And while he thought it all very odd and wondered if this voice spoke to all people in their dreams, the truth was that, of course, this was not a dream. How could it be? Was Stanley simply deceiving himself, believing that if he's asleep, he doesn't have to take responsibility for himself? Stanley is as awake right now as he's ever been in his life. Now, hearing the voice speak these words was quite a shock to Stanley. After all, he knew for certain, beyond a doubt, that this was in fact a dream. Did the voice not see him float and make the magical stars just a moment ago? How else would the voice explain all that? This voice was a part of himself too. Surely, if he could just...
Faut que je fasse quoi,
He
là?
would prove it. He would prove that he was in control, that this was a dream. So he closed his eyes gently, and he invited himself to wake up.
D'accord.
He felt the cool weight of the blanket on his skin, the press of the mattress on his back, the fresh air of a world outside this one. Let me wake up.
Laisse-moi me réveiller, se dit-il.
I'm through with this dream.
J'en ai
I
assez de
wish
ce
it to be
rêve. Je
over.
veux qu'il se termine.
Let me go back to my job. Let me continue pushing the buttons. Please. It's all I want. I want my apartment, and my wife, and my
Mon
job.
appartement et ma
All
femme et
I
mon
want
travail,
is
je
my
veux juste
life
retrouver ma vie
exactly the
exactement
way it's
telle
always
qu'elle était.
been. My life is normal.
Ma vie est normale, je
I
suis
am
normal,
normal.
tout va s'arranger. C'est pas si
Everything will
sûr.
be fine. I am
Je vais bien,
okay.
je vais bien, tout va bien. Ah, bah je me retrouve au même
Stanley
endroit.
began screaming. Please, someone wake me up. My name is Stanley. I have a boss. I have an office. I am real. Please, just someone tell me I am real. I must be real. I must be. Can anyone hear my voice? Who am I? Who am I? And everything went black. This is the story of a woman named Mariella.
Ah, on joue le rôle d'une femme maintenant.
Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She arose, got dressed, gathered her belongings, and walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. And although she would soon turn to go call for an ambulance, for just a few brief moments, she considered the strange man. He was obviously crazy. This much she knew. Everyone knows what crazy people look like. And in that moment, she thought to herself how lucky she was to be normal. I am sane. I am in control of my mind. I know what is real and what isn't.
Je sais que ce jeu il brise un peu le quatrième mur.
And in a
Tout ce
certain
que je
way,
sais.
seeing this man made her feel better. But then she
Humoristique,
remembered the
quoi.
meeting she had scheduled for that day. The very important people
Je sais pas
whose
comment on dit
impressions
faire le
of her
style de
would
jeu.
affect her career, and by extension, the rest of her life. She had no time for
Ça, le
this,
jeu s'adresse
so
à
it
vous
was only a
directement,
moment
donc
that she stood there,
on
staring
peut
down
briser
at
le
the body.
quatrième mur.
And then she turned and ran.
La première fois que j'ai lancé le jeu, j'ai réglé l'heure une fois. La deuxième fois, il m'a refait régler l'heure. Je crois que la sauvegarde n'est pas venue. Il me dit c'est bien d'avoir remis la même heure la deuxième fois. Et la troisième fois, il me demande si c'est toujours la même heure, c'est mon heure préférée. Et il m'a dit que la prochaine fois que je lance le jeu, il va mettre d'autres curseurs pour me connaître.
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room.
Stanley s'est rendu dans la
Perhaps he had
salle de
simply missed a
réunion, il avait
memo.
peut-être simplement raté un mémo. Bon, on va dans la salle de réunion. En fait, je suis mort, je pense que ça reprend du début, quoi.
When Stanley came to a set of two open doors, he
À
entered
la
the door
gauche,
on
on va
his left.
écouter la voix. Après, on monte les
Yet there
escaliers.
was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there.
Ah, je me suis mis en commande simple, tout peut jouer à la souris, c'est bien.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Ah,
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Shocked, unraveled, Stanley wondered in disbelief who orchestrated this, what dark secret was being held from him. What he could not have known was that the keypad behind the boss's desk guarded the terrible truth that his boss had been keeping from him, and so the boss had assigned it an extra secret PIN number.
comment trouver le code 2, 8, 4, 5.
But of course, Stanley couldn't possibly have known this. Yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. He stepped into the newly opened passageway.
Ouh, ça ressemble à un studio de cinéma, là. J'aurais dû appuyer sur le bouton, je crois.
Descending deeper into the building, Stanley
Qui sont
realized he
toujours
felt
plus
a
loin dans
bit
le bâtiment, ça
peculiar.
lui
It was a
réalisa
stirring of
que les
emotion in
émotions
his
se
chest,
bousculaient dans sa
as though he
poitrine.
felt more free to think for
Il
himself, to question the nature of
pense
his
par
job.
lui-même
Why did he
d'interroger
feel this
Ouais.
now, when for
Pourquoi
years
ressentait-il
it had never
maintenant
occurred
alors
to
que
him? This
pendant des
question
années,
would not go
cette question
unanswered
ne
for
resterait
long.
pas sans réponse bien longtemps.
Stanley walked straight ahead through the large door
Stanley
that
marcha
read
vers la grande
Mind
porte sur
Control
laquelle pouvait
Facility.
lire ce centre de contrôle.
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with
Lumière
television
éclairée d'une
screens.
salle
What
gigantesque
horrible
remplie d'écrans.
secret did this place hold? Stanley thought to himself. Did he have the strength to find out? Now the monitors jumped to life, their true nature revealed. Each bore the number of an employee in the building, Stanley's co-workers. The lives of so many individuals reduced to images on a screen, and Stanley, one of them, eternally monitored in this place where freedom meant nothing.
Continue.
This mind control facility,
Centre de
it
contrôle
was too
mental, c'est
horrible
trop
to
horrible
believe.
pour y
It
croire.
couldn't be true. Had Stanley really been under someone's
Il
control
a
all
passé
this
tout le temps sous le
time?
contrôle de
Was this the
quelqu'un
only
d'autre.
reason he was happy with his
La seule
boring
raison
job?
pour
That
laquelle il
his
était heureux
emotions
dans
had
son
been
travail.
manipulated to accept it
On
blindly?
saurait manipuler afin qu'il accepte son travail.
No. He refused to believe it.
Non,
He
il refusait
couldn't
d'y
accept
croire.
it.
Il ne pouvait
His
pas
own
l'accepter.
life in someone else's control? Never. It was unthinkable, wasn't it?
Est-ce
Was
qu'il y
it
a des
even
histoires
possible?
d'aliens là-dedans?
Had he truly spent
demande.
his entire life utterly blind
bien
to the
possible.
world?
On voit que dalle.
But here was the proof. The heart of the
Il était
operation.
pourtant sous ses yeux le cœur des opérations, les points marqués d'une émotion
happy
heureuse,
or
triste,
sad
satisfait.
or content, walking, eating, working, all of it
Un
monitored and
contrôle
commanded from this
offline,
very
manger
place.
toutes ses
And as
actions
the cold
surveillées.
reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he would dismantle the controls once and for all.
Les détruire, mais comment? Pas d'éclairage ici. Il y a une porte, est-ce qu'on peut l'ouvrir? Non. Ah, peut-être par là. Mind control awaiting input. On attend l'entrée.
And when at last he found the source of the room's power, he knew it was his duty, his
De son
obligation,
devoir était de
to put an
réduire sa
end to this
néance
horrible
malheureuse.
place and to everything it stood for.
Off.
Blackness and a rising chill of uncertainty. Was it over? Yes. He had won. He had defeated the machine, unshackled himself from someone else's command. Freedom was mere moments away. And yet, even as the immense door slowly opened, Stanley reflected on how many puzzles still lay unsolved. Where had his
Ça, toutes ces
co-workers
questions,
gone?
oui, t'es passé, c'est
How
toi.
had he been freed from the machine's grasp? What other mysteries did this strange building hold? But as sunlight streamed into the chamber, he realized none of this mattered to him, for it was not knowledge or even power that he had been seeking,
Par là.
but happiness. Perhaps his goal had not been to understand, but to let go. No longer would anyone tell him where to go, what to do, or how to feel. Whatever life he lives, it will be his. And that was all he needed to know.
Attendre, certainement.
It was perhaps the only thing
ça.
worth knowing. Stanley stepped through the
Stanley
open door.
franchit le seuil de la porte.
Stanley felt the cool breeze upon his skin, the feeling
La
of
sensation de
liberation,
liberté, tout ce
the
possible
immense
s'offre à
possibility
lui en
of the
suivant
new
le son nouveau
path
chemin.
before him. This
Un
was
des
exactly the
sentiments.
way,
C'est exactement ainsi
right
que
now,
les choses devaient se
that
passer.
things were meant to happen. And Stanley was happy.
Bon, je vais pas faire un long stream là pour commencer parce que je vais manger après. Et je reprendrai tout à l'heure, quoi. La fin n'est jamais la fin. D'accord.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the
D'abord,
meeting
je vais
room.
faire une autre
Perhaps
chose. On va refaire. Retour au menu. Commencer le jeu. Ok.
all of his
Faire un
co-workers
task
were
spécial.
gone. What could it
Faut sûrement
mean?
relancer le jeu du
Stanley
début.
decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps
Du
he had
bureau.
simply missed a memo. When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, this was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it. Ah, yes, truly a room worth
Voilà une
admiring.
pièce.
It had really been worth the detour after all, just to spend a few moments here in this immaculate, beautifully constructed room. Stanley simply stood here, but eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left. Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago. Look, Stanley, I think perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot.
C'est Stanley, nous sommes partis du mauvais pied. Je ne suis pas votre
I
ennemi,
realize that
vraiment pas.
investing your trust in someone else can be difficult, but the fact is that the story has
Le
been
fait
about
que depuis
nothing
tout
but
temps, cette
you
histoire me
all this
concerne
time.
que vous.
There's someone you've been neglecting,
Il y
Stanley.
a quelqu'un que vous négligez,
Someone you've
Stanley.
forgotten
Quelqu'un que vous avez oublié.
Please, stop trying
S'il
to
vous
make
plaît,
every
arrêtez de
decision
prendre
by yourself.
toutes les décisions
I'm
seules.
not asking for me.
Je ne vous demande pas pour moi, mais pour elle.
This is it, Stanley. Your chance to redeem
Stanley, votre
yourself,
chance de vous
to
racheter.
put your work aside,
Votre chance d'oublier
to let
votre
her
travail pour
back
ramener
into
à
your
votre vie.
life. She's been waiting.
Elle attend. Qui attend?
That's her, Stanley. You need to be the one to
C'est
do
elle,
this,
Stanley.
to
À
reach
vous de
out to
faire le
her.
premier pas.
If you can truly place your faith in another, Then pick up the phone.
Il décroche. Ah. 426.
Oh, Stanley, is that you? Hold on, sweetie. Sorry to keep you waiting. I'm just pulling the bread out of the oven. All right. Okay, there we go. All right, now, I want you to come in and tell me all about your day.
Gotcha. Oh, come on. Did you actually think you had a loving wife who'd want to commit their life to you? I'm trying to make a point here, Stanley. I'm trying to get you to see something. Come inside. Let me show you what's really going on here. This is a very sad story about the death of a man named Stanley.
Ah, je suis mort.
Stanley is quite a boring fellow. He has a job that demands nothing of him, and every button that he pushes is a reminder of the inconsequential nature of his existence.
Si j'appuie pas, ça fait quoi?
Look at him there, pushing buttons, doing exactly what he's told to do. Now he's pushing a button. Now he's eating lunch. Now he's going home. Now he's coming back to work. One might even feel sorry for him, except that he's chosen this life.
J'appuie pas, j'attends cette fois. J'ai appuyé sur espace. Enfin, ça fait. Donc, j'ai été obligé d'appuyer sur eux. Hein. Ouais, je crois que j'ai pas le choix.
But in his mind, in his mind he can go on fantastic adventures. From behind his desk, Stanley dreamed of wild expeditions into the unknown, fantastic discoveries of new lands. It was wonderful. And each day that he returned to work was a reminder that none of it would ever happen. And so he began to fantasize about his own job. First, he imagined that one day while at work, he stepped up from his desk to realize that all of his co-workers, his boss, everyone in the building had suddenly vanished off the face of the earth.
The thought
excited him terribly. So he went further. He imagined that he came to two open doors.
D'accord, le fait d'appuyer sur les touches, c'est travailler son imagination.
It barely even mattered what lay behind each door. The mere thought that his decisions would mean something was almost too wonderful to behold. As he wandered through this fantasy world, he began to fill it with many possible paths and destinations. Down one path lay an enormous round room with monitors and mind controls. And down another was a yellow line that weaved in many directions. And down another was a game with a baby. And he called it the Stanley Parabole. It was such a wonderful fantasy, and so in his head he relived it again, and then again, and again, over and over, wishing beyond hope that it would never end, that he might always feel this free. Surely there's an answer down some new path, mustn't there be? Perhaps if he played just one more time. But there is no answer. How could there possibly be? In reality, all he's doing is pushing the same buttons he always has. Nothing has changed. The longer he spends here, the more invested he gets, the more he forgets which life is the real one. And I'm trying to tell him this, that in this world he can never be anything but an observer, that as long as he remains here, he's slowly killing himself. But he won't listen to me. He won't stop. Here. Watch this. Stanley, the next time the screen asks you to push a button, do not do it.
D'accord. Il m'a demandé de pas appuyer, mais j'appuie pas. Mais combien de temps? Là, je pense qu'on est obligé d'appuyer, quoi. Que est-il?
You see,
obligé, quoi.
can he just not hear me? How can I tell him in a way that he'll understand that every second he remains here, he's electing to kill himself? How can I get him to see what I see? How can I make him look at himself? I suppose I can't, not in the way I want him to. But I don't make the rules. I simply play to my intended purpose, the same as Stanley. We're not so different, I suppose. I'll try once more to convey all this to him. I'm compelled to. I must. Perhaps, well, maybe this time he'll see. Maybe this time. And I tried again, and Stanley pushed a button. And I tried again, and Stanley pushed a button. And I tried.
Je suis mort, encore une fois. Bon, on reprend du début.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean?
Mais pourquoi ils
Stanley
avaient
decided to
disparu?
go to the meeting room.
Je
Perhaps
suis
he had simply
savoir.
missed a memo. When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left. Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer. Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office. Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. What could it mean? Stanley wondered aloud to nobody. He began wildly tearing through papers on the boss's desk, pulling books off the shelf, looking behind paintings, desperate for clues to his situation. But his attention was caught by a keypad behind the boss's desk. What could its purpose be? In fact, this keypad guarded the terrible secret that lay buried below his feet. And so the boss had assigned it an extra secret PIN number, 2845. But of course, Stanley couldn't possibly have known this. Yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. He stepped into the newly opened passageway.
Ok, on refait le parti là. Ah, c'est un autre endroit, on dirait bien.
Stanley walked straight ahead through the large door that read
C'est
Mind
de la
Control
grande porte,
Facility.
donc centre de contrôle mental.
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens. What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley thought to himself. Did he have the strength to find out? Now the monitors jumped to life, their true nature revealed. Each bore the number of an employee in the building. Stanley's co-workers. The lives of so many individuals reduced to images on a screen, and Stanley, one of them, eternally monitored in this place where freedom meant nothing. This mind control facility, it was too horrible to believe. It couldn't be true. Had Stanley really been under someone's control all this time? Was this the only reason he was happy with his boring job? That his emotions had been manipulated to accept it blindly? No, he refused to believe it. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control? Never! It was unthinkable, wasn't it? Was it even possible? Had he truly spent his entire life utterly blind to the world? But here was the proof. The heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions. Happy, or sad, or content. Walking, eating, working. All of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he would dismantle the controls once and for all. Oh, Stanley, you didn't just activate the controls, did you? After they kept you enslaved all these years, you go and you try to take control of the machine for yourself. Is that what you wanted? Control? Oh, Stanley, I applaud your effort, I really do. But you need to understand, there's only so much that machine can do. You were supposed to let it go, turn the controls off, and leave. If you want to throw my story off track, you're going to have to do much better than that. I'm afraid you don't have nearly the power you think you do. For example, and I believe you'll find this pertinent, Stanley suddenly realized he had just initiated the network's emergency detonation system. In the event that this machine is activated without proper DNA identification, nuclear detonators are set to explode, eliminating the entire complex. How long until detonation then? Let's say, 2 minutes. Now this is making things a little more fun, isn't it, Stanley? It's your time to shine. You are the star. It's your story now. Shape it to your heart's desires. Oh, this is much better than what I had in mind. What a shame we have so little time left to enjoy it. Mere moments until the bomb goes off. But what precious moments each one of them is. More time to talk about you, about me, where we're going, what all this means. I barely know where to start. What's that? You'd like to know where your co-workers are? A moment of solace before you're obliterated? All right, I'm in a good mood. You're gonna die anyway. I'll tell you exactly what happened to them. I erased them. I turned off the machine. I set you free. Of course, that was merely in this instance of the story. Sometimes when I tell it, I simply let you sit there in your office forever, pushing buttons endlessly and then dying alone. Other times, I let the office sink into the ground, swallowing everyone inside, or I let it burn to a crisp. I have to say this, though, this version of events has been rather amusing. Watching you try to make sense of everything and take back the control wrested away from you, it's quite rich. I almost hate to see it go. But I'm sure whatever I come up with on the next go-around will be even better. My goodness, only 34 seconds left. But I'm enjoying this so much. You know what? To hell with it. I'm going to put some extra time on the clock. Why not? These are precious additional seconds, Stanley. Time doesn't grow on trees. Oh dear me, what's the matter, Stanley? Is it that you have no idea where you're going or what you're supposed to be doing right now? Or did you just assume when you saw that timer that something in this room was capable of turning it off? I mean, look at you. Running from button to button, screen to screen, clicking on every little thing in this room. These numbered buttons, no, these colored ones. Or maybe this big red button, or this door. Everything, anything, something here will save me. Why would you think that, Stanley? That this video game can be beaten? Won? Solved? Do you have any idea what your purpose in this place is? Stanley, you're in for quite a disappointment. But here's a spoiler for you. That timer isn't a catalyst to keep the action moving along. It's just seconds ticking away to your death. You're only still playing instead of watching a cutscene because I want to watch you for every moment that you're powerless. To see you made humble. This is not a challenge, it's a tragedy. You wanted to control this world, that's fine. But I'm going to destroy it first, so you can't.
pas trop compris ce qu'il
Take a
faut
look at the
faire
clock,
là.
Stanley. That's 30 seconds you have left to
5.
struggle. 30 seconds until a big boom and then nothing. No ending here, just you being blown to pieces. Will you cling desperately to your frail life, or will you let it go peacefully? Another choice. Make it count, or don't. It's all the same to me, all a part of the joke. And believe me, I will be laughing at every second of your inevitable life from the moment we fade in until the moment I say, happily ever after.
Bon, je vais quitter le jeu. Comme ça, la prochaine fois, je le relance. Et on verra ce qu'il nous fait au début du jeu. Et je vais manger, donc je vais arrêter le stream en même temps. Donc, je vous dis à bien plus tard. Je sais pas dans combien de temps, une demi-heure, 1 heure, on verra bien. Allez, à toutes.